Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS Current Affair Analysis for 9th May 2020, and these are the articles we'll be dealing today. The first article for the day is taken from the Indian Express and it is titled Let Down by Law. So this is about Interstate Migrant Workmen Act 1979. So this Interstate Migrant Workmen Act is an act of parliament which was passed in 1979. So this was enacted to regulate the conditions of service of interstate laborers in Indian labor law. So the act's main purpose is to protect workers whose services are required outside their native states in India. So whenever an employer faces shortage of skills, especially among the local population, the act creates provisions to employ better skilled people from elsewhere. So these interstate migrant workers have certain additional rights as per this law, such as equal or better wages for similar nature of work. There is something called displacement allowance. There are also certain allowances like the home journey allowance. The employer must give suitable residence to the worker. He also has a right to lodge complaints if any of his rights are not met. So these are the broad thematic areas that this act covers. In the aftermath of the lockdown imposed due to COVID-19 crisis, one of the major challenges that state governments faced was lack of data on migrant labor. So this is because of the bad implementation of this particular act. If the act was implemented in its spirit, the state governments would have had complete data, because this law says that every migrant labor should be registered, and for that to happen, either the contractor who is hiring them or the company that is recruiting them directly must also be registered, and the database must be updated from time to time. But as we have seen, not even a single state has implemented this database in its letter and spirit. The first reason that many companies cited for lack of this data is the compliance burden placed upon them. It requires not only equal pay for interstate workmen but also requires other social protections that would make their employment significantly more expensive than interstate workmen. So we are talking about home journey allowance, suitable residence, and all this will actually increase the labor cost. There is no incentive for hiring other state workers, because it would make employment even more costlier than actually recruiting local people. So it brings forth two major important issues. First one is the relevance of such kind of laws and the capacity of the states to enforce such laws. As a consequence, what happened was this forced formalization remained only on paper. If you take the case of urban migrant workers, there is no formal protection available to them because the laws are not implemented. Compare and contrast that with the rural workers, they at least have certain laws like Manrega. So the immediate need of the hour is to make these laws relevant to the present times, taking into considerations the inhibitions of various issues like costs of compliance and also the state's capacity to enforce these laws. So that is the gist of this article. The next article for the day is taken from the Hindu and it is titled Shaping India's Response in a Global Hinge Movement. So we are living in a world where Asia Pacific became the new economic and political center of the world. So who are the major players in this Asia Pacific theater? Firstly, it is the rise of China, which has shifted the focus to Asia Pacific along with the growth of India. So China and India are generally seen as the two competitors in this region. However, the author of this article feels that there are certain other powers also who should be taken into consideration while talking about Asia Pacific, especially in the policy connotation. So what are the other powers that we are talking about? It is Indonesia, Vietnam, Iran and South Korea. Even though Iran is far away from this Asia Pacific region geographically, it is very significant for various reasons. But more than any other reason, it is the oil of Iran that is significant for this Asia Pacific region. So what are the major trends that are threatening the present multipolar world and what is the future likely to be. So, if you take a look at the facets of the present international political order, the first one is the retreat of multilateralism. Say, for example, if you take a look at Donald Trump's America First slogan, it focuses on retreat of multilateralism, and it is always focused on a transactional nature of foreign policy, meaning he's always focused on what is beneficial for his own country, and he does not care about the multilateral global rules that we have set for ourselves. Say, for example, the World Trade Organization, he accuses, is always in the favor of developing countries like India. So there is this retreat of multilateralism. Secondly, we have a new arms race. So this arms race has taken a new shape because non-conventional form of war has also increased. Say, for example, we have more and more cyber security professionals who would want to protect their sovereign governments and cyber infrastructure from hackers. Apart from that, the countries are also going back to the arms race that we have seen in the Cold War era. The next trend is the US-China relationship, which has always been a very significant one in the global order. After the global financial crisis, is now witnessing certain cracks because both China and US wants to dominate the global economy, and this tug of war has put the world in a critical hinge movement. That is the hinge movement that we're talking about. So what should India do in this present context? As a response to this global hinge movement, we have various experts and policymakers suggesting that probably India should get into some kind of an alliance with either the US or any other multilateral grouping to ensure that the rise of China in the region is checked. But time and again, India has proved to be very resilient. Even during the peaks of global Cold War era, India did not join either side and has officially taken a stance. So we have to continue that strategic autonomy and ensure that we don't get into some sort of an alliance which has long lasting repercussions for our country. Definitely, an alliance feels like an easy way out and an insurance policy against all sorts of attacks from China in this region, whether it is the economic front or whether it is the security aspect or the dominance in this region. But this is like a shortcut. What is required now is creative diplomacy and flexibility in our thinking. So an alliance is just the opposite for this kind of flexibility. It will restrain our ability to align with different countries because of the foreign policy of the country that we are entering into an alliance with. Say, for example, if you are entering into an alliance with the United States, the present regime is hostile towards Iran, but India is very much dependent on fuel that we get from Iran. So this kind of strategic restraints will be imposed when we enter alliances, and therefore it is important to maintain this strategic autonomy. Secondly, if we take a look at whether these alliances will help us, we already have a fine example in the form of Doklam, where not even a single country has come in defense for India. So it shows that the world is much more dependent on China economically, and therefore they don't want to rub off China on the wrong side. However, the situation might change after COVID-19. It is interesting to see how things would shape up in the post-COVID world. In 1988, the Prime Minister during that particular point of time, Rajiv Gandhi, visited China, and that was the second visit after Nehru's visit. So in that particular meeting, both the governments came to a conclusion that we need to arrive at a policy called the modus vivendi, which roughly translates to way of life. So this modus vivendi of India-China relations that took place nearly 30 years ago was focused on separating the bilateral issues like trade and other aspects with that of border disputes. So this was trained in the Doklam issue. So this was a clear indication that the 1988 modus vivendi agreement has no longer functioned. So the author believes that the time has finally come to engage with China for a new modus vivendi deal. It is already understood that we pretty much need the US to grow economically, and it is very central for our development. However, we also have to remember that US is no longer aspiring to be that global power, and it is withdrawing from the global order. If you take the case of Afghanistan, if you take the case of exit from various UN bodies and retreating from its commitments towards various international organizations like WHO, it is very clear that US don't want to be a global power that it used to be. So in this context, we have to look for alternative modes of engagement with various countries across the world to ensure that this multipolar world is pretty much a reality. Otherwise, it would become a unipolar world dominated by China. And definitely, US is not going to be helping us in this endeavor. So at this point, the question that we have to ask ourselves is this: what is the ultimate objective of India's foreign policy? We don't have a clear-cut policy document which states that, say, this is our foreign policy and this is the objective which we are chasing. We are not even clear about the ways and means to achieve that. That is another problem. Time and again, our Prime Minister Modi has reiterated that India's foreign policy aim is to make people look at India as a Vishwaguru or a universal teacher. So we are not really sure as to the end objective of this aim, because how is it going to transform the lives of millions of people in our country? That is the question that we have to ask ourselves. Probably it can build up our morale, but it shall not be a reality given the context that we are still a net importer of knowledge and we depend on foreign technology. We have not yet progressed to a stage where we are producing our own technology, and a aspiration of being a Vishwaguru is still far ahead. So what is the way ahead for India? The first thing that India has to understand is this contention between US and China is a temporary thing, but still it will have a long lasting impact. What India must focus on is building capacities on all its fronts. So if we take the case of global commons, that is, the present COVID-19 crisis is one such issue which is bothering the entire humanity. Take the issues of climate change, take the case of cyber warfare. On all these fronts, India should take a lead stance and guide the rest of the world. That is how we can aspire to be a Vishwaguru, at least on certain matters. At the same time, we also have to ensure that our economic progress is taking place. For this, we have to ensure that we engage more with the capital. We have to focus on our social and political conditions within the country in order to ensure that equitable development happens sustainably across all the states. So for this to happen, we have to engage with our subnational governments, that is state governments, and when the state governments are in cooperation with the central government, it is then when we can aspire to be a global leader or Vishwaguru. That is the gist of this article.